Hey, what's going on, everyone? So, yeah, I I went out for a few drinks last night with work, came back quite drunk, and I recorded my thoughts on this conversation that I'm going to do now. But okay, I fell asleep. I listened back to it this morning. I was like, I just can't upload this. I'm sure some people would be disappointed. Not to hear me in my drunken state, but it's so bad you could barely hear me. So I thought, let's just record it fresh again today. So yeah, sorry to disappoint those who might be looking forward to me being lop-sop yanged over the microphone. But yeah, I mean this conversation, it's always one that's always been debated. But I suppose when you think about it, the word fun can be used in just many ways, and certainly for the most part, when we use the word fun, I think you almost get images in your head, of probably just silly happiness, just happiness, but fun at its core can mostly just mean enjoyable, and pleasurable, and that in the context of video games can be applied to over probably every aspect of a game, its graphics, its sound, its controls, its story, etc. With the recent release of Death Stranding, we've once again seen a number of people and reviewers using the age-old not every game needs to be fun quote. And of course, given the context of a game like Death Stranding, we also need to be careful where we're applying that quote. Death Stranding, for the most part, is clearly trying to tell a somewhat serious story in a setting that hardly no one would, I suppose, describe as fun, given this bleak, grey, post-apocalyptic-like setting. There's, of course, nothing wrong with games that use this type of tone. I mean, why would there be, right? Video games, like every other media, can and should tackle every type of scenario that we see and have experienced or just imagined within our lives. But this is where video games are different to other forms of entertainment, like films and books. For the vast majority, video games progression, no matter how linear or simple they are constructed, requires the player's interaction through a controller. They require the player to move the game forwards in whatever means, in whatever forward means for that game. However we try to spin it, this is what we call gameplay for the most part in games, and this is where we go back to the age-old argument about what's the most important thing in gaming. Many people would argue it's gameplay. Some would argue it's the look. Others would argue, again, it's a mixture of both, and so forth. But my argument has always been, if you're not having fun controlling the game, then that will always be a detriment to the game itself. No matter how good it looks, no matter how good it sounds, no matter how compelling the story is, the pace, or whatever. This is the greatest difference between games and where people sometimes compare games to books or movies. In books you are subject to the author's writing. No matter how fast or slow you can turn that page, the words and progression never differ. The same as with movies. No matter what happens, whether you skip chapters or mute the audio, that film's progression and direction will never change. You have absolutely no control over this direction that fundamentally changes what the movie is. But with games, this is the difference, right? You have to always have a level of personal interaction in order to move forwards. And it's that interaction that, in my opinion, always needs to be fun. And let's remember what fun means again. It just means enjoyable, pleasurable, for the most part. To put this into context, and considering that Halloween has just passed, and based on the gameplay that I'll put up on here, I personally really enjoyed Eternal Darkness. I think it's a great game with some great ideas. The nature of the game itself is horror in nature and tells a pretty dark story of humanity's fight against the forces of evil from the void between realities. But like many games of its nature, it's not like you'll always be having what we class as fun with the narrative or the tone of the game. we'll be engaged, of course, emotionally invested, nervous, on edge, or perhaps some could even argue that the very nature of being on edge and made to jump out of your chair has an element of fun to it. As many people laugh at themselves, from being scared in the first place, which is absolutely fine. But let's remember, the video game difference again. No matter how staged some elements of a game design are, we are the ones initiating that move from A to B. And it's in between that A to B is where I feel video games always need to be fun, no matter what the subject matter is. One game I played and really enjoyed was Dear Esther. I always bring this game up, because it's one of those games that people class as a walking simulator. But I can also understand how people can consider it boring. You have the controls of a first-person game, being able to move and look in all directions. But that's where it ends in terms of physical player input, as you essentially walk your character through a fixed narrative and fixed paths in order to, merely listen to the spoken narrative as you walk. The story is very somber, and there is never a moment where you smile. So what keeps you going for those that are invested in this type of game? Well, graphically, it's lovely to look at, with its well-detailed, realistic environments, much like Death Stranding. The narrative, I personally found to be really engaging, much like people will, I'm sure, with Death Stranding. But where many people, including myself, might struggle is with your interaction with the game. At that point A to B again, it's slow, it's hardly engaging, as you progress across the environments. This doesn't mean that it needs to be anything else. Let's not get mistaken here. The game can be what it wants to be, but what it falls down to is that your physical engagement, that player interaction between A and B, is just simply not fun. So that always, in my opinion, will be a detriment, to the game's overall enjoyment. And this can be applied to many games we've both lauded and criticized over the years. So when we look at games like this, the fun element comes from the most fundamental and arguably the most defining thing about video games, and that's the controls. The controls of a game get us from point A to B. It doesn't matter what the subject matter of the game is. Its graphics, its sound. In my opinion, the most important aspect of a game that always needs to be fun are its controls. And fun for controls means enjoyable and pleasurable, no matter what the context is. Because if you're struggling or not engaged through the simple premise of the input required to move the game forwards, then this will always be a sticking point for many, if not most, a point of contention. Now, Dear Esther, like I said, it was a slow game. Your walking speed was slow. You would be listening to the narrative, but like I said, it's just moving through that game was just not exciting. People love Resident Evil. If you go back to Resident Evil, people love it. Yet if you ask people what its biggest issue was, for many, it would have been the tank controls that make from getting point A to B the chore for some people. Not so much the tone of the game or the pace of the game, even though the pace along with the controls, add to this to a point. You ask people what drove them nuts in Red Dead Redemption, it would have been the controls. People complained about most 3D PS1 games because they were forced to control a 3D game with a D-pad. They would still love many games, but controlling them, few were classed as fun. And you have to ask yourself how much more enjoyable games like the original Tenchu Stealth Assassins would have been. A game I loved on the PlayStation 1, if it had better controls. How many people do you hear complaining about the controls of Super Mario Odyssey? Even if they hated the narrative, the collecting of moons and even the visual design of the game, I don't remember a single complaint. Because controlling Mario in that game was a 3D piece of perfection, in my opinion, which is what I've done my review on. I love earlier games like Parasite Eve 1 and 2 on the PlayStation 1, because these games have improved in the backgrounds. The controls were slow in those games. That making getting from point A to B a chore. controlling Io was just not fun. It's just a matter of it. It's given the more serious context and narrative as well. If you're given a serious narrative and then controls that that don't fully engage you. I could list a wealth of other examples, of course, but in my opinion, that the fundamental interaction between the player and the game always needs to be fun. And then later on we can complain or praise the additional things that come with it, like the gameplay, which the gameplay-wise is also tightly related to the controls. And then later things like graphics, sound, story, music, etc., all of which play a far more greater role on our own personal preferences. What I'd like to think you'll notice with me is I suppose consistency in my beliefs on things. So I loved Super Mario 3D World. I think it's one of the best 3D Marios. I really do. I'll just use this as a final example, hopefully. But I've always lamented a little at the choice of using the 8 directions of control. Considering our other 3D Mario games, were always just the pinnacle of 3D platforming. I had fun with the controls. They worked, they were fine, but not as much fun as I think I might have had if it had full 3D control over Mario and crew. Many of us love the characters, graphics, and narratives of say the Uncharted series, but let's not pretend that Nathan Drake and crew control like gods in those games, because they don't. Hence our frustrations when it comes to platforming and moving around, which then plays overall into the gameplay as well, which, like I said, is tightly controlled, tightly linked to the controls. The overall controls in The Witcher 3, a thing to be desired as another example. I love the narrative and the world, but man, did I have fun playing that game because of those controls? Hell no. And after playing something like Breath of the Wild, I find it nearly impossible to go back to The Witcher without being frustrated. Controlling Geralt is not a fun experience. It's tolerable, it works, but it's just not fun. Those are the games. So there are games that control fine, for the most part, of course. This is great, and we know that we won't, for the most part, not be having fun as we move from A to B in these games, but then our complaints, will always come in other forms, past, like I said, the gameplay, music, etc. Our input and interaction in a game should always be fun, enjoyable, and pleasurable. I feel, because if that isn't fun, then we're already starting off on a bad foot, in my opinion. The controls are so fundamental that for me they do need to be the most fun part, and that obviously then links to the gameplay. So in Death Stranding's case, I'm sure the controls are fine, but just for me, just watching gameplay, you can tell that it's going to have some issues. And then couple that with the type of gameplay and the slow narrative, you can see where the points of contention start coming in. So I think this is a quick discussion, but let me know your thoughts on the whole, not every game needs to be fun. In my opinion, that it does always need to be fun, and that one fun element, that one crucial fun element for me, are the controls. You should feel comfortable moving from point A to B, whether you're selecting through menus, whatever UIs, even if it's a puzzle game. Everything should flow nicely and just work. It should just be a pleasure, and that pleasure is fun. So let me know your thoughts as always. I'll have another video out tomorrow, if not Monday. But what I'm trying to do now, I made a promise to myself. I'm going to try and get 2 videos out a week, and one video will be on a Wednesday and one video will be on a Saturday. I'm going to try and stick to those 2 days. Now that doesn't mean I'm only going to do 2 videos a week, because if I can get more videos out in between, then I will. But what I'm trying to promise myself now is to have at least 2 videos out a week. So come next week, hold me to that. Hold me to that, and I'll work on my best for it. But as always, thanks for listening all. Take care and peace.